Got it. Hi, welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give it a few minutes to reach critical mass and then we'll get started. Thank you. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We're going to give it a few minutes to reach critical mass and then we'll get started. Thank you so much. Welcome everybody. Thank you for joining us. We'll give it a few more minutes and we'll get started. Thank you. I'm still seeing people trickling in, so I think why don't we give it until maybe 6:35 unless Dave and Ed, you feel like we should get started? You let me know.
It sounds reasonable to me. Yeah. Just give it a minute or so. We appreciate everyone's patience. Thank you.
Okay, oh, I was about to say I'm not seeing anybody else coming in and then somebody join. That's funny. Um, well, I'm gonna get started because it's almost 6:35. Want to make sure that we don't run over time. or that we go over time. So welcome everybody. My name is Angeli Ramos. Thank you so much for making the time this evening into learning more about 100% clean energy by 2035 in New Jersey, why we need it, what it means, and how you can help move it forward. Next slide.
So real quickly, who we are, I want to introduce you to Dave Rogers with the Sierra Club. He's the Deputy Director of Beyond Coal. He's been in that position since 2016. And previous to that, he was at Environment North Carolina. He's done all kinds of great work in voter mobilization and as a graduate of DePaul University. And then also with us is Angeli Ramos. She's director of Sierra Club. She's also a chemist and spent a good number of years at the Department of Environmental Protection, where she did a lot of work protecting New Jersey's air quality, and does a tremendous effort with the work of Sierra Club and its many volunteers here in New Jersey. And I'm Ed Potosnik. I'm executive director at New Jersey LCV, and we work to protect New Jersey's air, water, and land. And then in addition, I'm a member of council in Franklin Township and Somerset County. It just came off a successful election, and happy to be with you as well to talk about a really important piece of legislation. If you go to the next slide, we can tell you a little bit about what we have planned tonight, which is a little bit about the energy landscape in New Jersey and throughout the region. You'll learn a little bit about how New Jersey connects in for reliability with our neighboring states to ensure we have consistent power for our needs, why 100% clean energy is important, why we need it now, what it means for our families and the health of our communities. What is the Energy Leadership Act, which is a piece of legislation we're highly supportive of, and why it's urgently needed to pass through the lame duck session, which is the session after the election, which we just had, and through January 20th, when the new governor and the new assembly is sworn in, and of course the Senate is resworn in, although they weren't voted in again, and leadership which reorganized. The status of the bill, and then what you can do to help advance this important legislation. So we're really happy that you took time tonight to be with us. This is being recorded, so you can share it with your friends and family and neighbors, and we hope that what you learn you can share, because it's important to get the word out there. There's a lot of threats that we come under every single day, including the rising cost of utilities. You're going to learn about why that exists and how clean energy can be part of the solution, and how we can help clean up our environment and produce a more healthy and sustainable future for our children and grandchildren, all at the same time. The two are not at odds. And so we just want to say thank you for being here. And I turn it over, I guess, next to Angeli, and then we're going to hear from a little bit more from Dave. Did I get that right?
I think I'm next.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah. Thanks, everyone. So yeah, Dave Rogers here. I am as the Deputy Director for Beyond Coal, which is the home of Sierra Club's national work on the electricity sector. I lead up our work in the eastern part of the country, so I spend a lot of time, as you can imagine, thinking about PJM and its role in our transition to affordable clean energy. So if you want to go to the next slide. One of the things that Anjali asked was just to give a kind of base level set around the regional role of electricity here in New Jersey. It's obviously a pretty complicated situation. So just sharing some basic information. And PJM is the regional grid operator, or you'll hear people refer to as an RTO, or regional transmission organization. That is a set of utilities who have come together to essentially share resources and do collaborative planning to bring a bunch of benefits to customers. So there's a whole bunch of positive things about joining a regional transmission organization like PJM, but there's also some challenges that I'm going to spend some time talking about. One of the positives is that it allows you to access a broader geographic landscape. So I think that's especially important for land constrained states like PJM. So being part of a regional transmission uh, organization allows New Jersey to access renewable energy in places like Indiana and Ohio. That also, one of the advantages of building the biggest grid possible is you can build a grid that's more reliable because it's bigger than the weather. So it might be really, really cold or very, very cloudy in one part of the regional transmission organization, but it could be very sunny or very windy in another part, and allows you to balance out those resources, providing a bunch of reliability benefits. Another advantage is you can lower the amount of generation, or what people refer to as capacity, that's needed, because you're not as reliant on a smaller number of power plants that, if any one of them goes down, could create a reliability issue. So if you have, hundreds of power plants instead of just dozens, you're less subject to reliability issues if one of them was able to fall. And so that helps lower the overall costs for everybody. I think there's a couple of challenges that are in particular affecting PJM right now. One is which is that if you are in a regional transmission organization where there is a pretty aggressive load growth, particularly in specific geographic areas. So think of data centers being developed in Virginia, which is the kind of ground zero for data center development. Those the impacts of that spread across the entire regional transmission organization. So you're not insulated from impacts, and if the costs aren't allocated fairly, that can drive up costs across the entire system. Um, and then I think the other thing to note is that you are if there's a broken system, like one of the biggest challenges with PJM, which I'll talk a little bit more about later, is that getting new generation resources on the grid is a pretty large problem. And if that's broken at the system-wide level, it creates cascading issues that end up impacting people all across the region. And that can cause a whole bunch of problems, particularly around driving up costs. So if you want to go to the next slide, I think one thing, if you're going to take one thing away from this presentation, at least my part of it, is that load growth is real and it's something that needs to be addressed and dealt with. So there's a bunch of factors driving load growth in PJM that's directly impacting New Jersey. Factors include data centers, which I think a lot of people are aware of, but also additional new manufacturing, advanced manufacturing across the region, as well as beneficial electrification. So more people buying electric vehicles, people switching from gas furnaces to heat pumps, et cetera, is also having an impact on load. But I would say in the near term, the biggest factor is data centers. And I want to note that there's clearly some speculation around data centers, and I would bet that we won't hit what PJM's forecasting today, but it's worth noting that some of this is real, and we do need to plan to meet ever increasing loads, both in the short and long term. So part of the work that Beyond Coal is working on across the country and in PJM is to help determine what is speculation, what is actually real, and make sure regional transmission operators and utilities are actually planning more accurately. So if you want to go to the next slide. In addition to load growing up, as I mentioned earlier, there's a problem with interconnecting new resources. So it's pretty basic economics. When supply or need is going, or demand or need is going up and supply remains stagnant, costs are going to increase. And that's one of the things we're seeing pretty severely in PJM. There's a bunch of different costs that go into people's power bills, things like replacing and upgrading poles and wires on the distribution systems that go right to folks' houses, the larger transmission wires that crisscross the state and the region. Um, but capacity costs are an increasing, one of the places where costs are increasing the most severely. And that's what this shows, is how much it's costing PJM customers just to get the capacity that utilities need to be able to run the system reliably. And it's worth noting that the part of the graph where it's kind of peaking in the most recent years, Even those were subject to a cap because of advocacy from a set of governors, including the New Jersey governor and Governor Shapiro in Pennsylvania as well, among others. So these costs would be higher if not for the advocacy to put a cap on those. And that is one of the kind of biggest driving issues about why we need more capacity. And we'll spend a little bit later talking about why clean energy is the best fit for that. But that's a huge driver of this. And the other thing I'll note in terms of costs, and why investing in clean energy makes sense from affordability perspective is that fuel costs are also a huge driver of this. And if the plan is just to meet ever increasing needs on the system with gas, you really put yourself at risk of skyrocketing gas and fossil fuel cost, having a huge impact on customers' bills as well. So, in addition to being lower cost, clean energy resources also are less risky because there is no fuel costs that can go up and down based on kind of world events that are out of our control. So if you want to go to the next slide, this looks a little bit more at New Jersey and New Jersey's role. A few slides ago, I showed what the load forecasts of PJM as a whole are on the system. It's worth noting that New Jersey is facing similar issues and constraints to other states. So while Virginia is the real kind of hotspot of data centers are being proposed in New Jersey. There's other things driving load growth in the state as well. So this isn't a problem of other states necessarily kind of putting things directly on New Jersey. There's load growth in New Jersey as well. And in general, if allocate costs are allocated well and the load growth is on things like beneficial electrification, new electric vehicles, things like Sierra Club and LCV support. Load growth isn't necessarily a bad thing. But it's really important that, those responsible for causing additional costs are the ones kind of paying for it. One positive I would say is if you look a little bit more closely, New Jersey's forecasts from previous years are a little more accurate compared to what we've seen in other parts of the PJM service territory. So you'll note that the 2024 and 2025 lines are fairly close together. That gives me a little hope that we can have an accurate number that we can plan for the future, but we are going to see load growth in New Jersey. And the other thing, just to note on this particular slide and then with this issue is New Jersey's likely moving towards more of a winter peaking system. To date, the times of highest demand tend to have been summer. So you can imagine those really hot summer days when everybody's kicking on their air conditioning. But projecting out to the future, winter is going to be a time where the demand is actually becoming higher and higher. And it's just important to note that that brings a different set of solutions. Most of those winter peaking events tend to be early morning events. So those are places where solar, for example, are not the best resources. So that's where you need a portfolio of resources to meet our needs. So things like offshore wind match winter mornings particularly well, including battery storage across the system so that you can leverage the solar that was produced earlier, the day before. All of those kind of things are ways that New Jersey and the system can manage the winter peaking as that becomes a larger and larger issue. So if you want to go to the next slide, a couple things worth to note with New Jersey that I think it's important. I mentioned on the first slide that one of the advantages of joining a broader regional transmission organization is that you can get access to resources in other parts of the country. New Jersey is a fairly populated region. It's relatively small as a state. So that's one of the advantages is you can take advantage of resources that are just easier to develop. Things like onshore wind, Ohio, Indiana, places like that are just better locations to develop those. But it's worth noting that New Jersey is what we call an energy importer. So New Jersey does not produce enough power to meet its own need today. So that makes them reliant on other states. And other states might not be considering policies as strong in terms of clean energy. And that likely means importing additional fossil fuels. And it also puts New Jersey as a place that's vulnerable to things like fuel costs if the price of gas, spikes really highly. So we're gonna need more energy in the state. As much as that can be procured and built in state is helpful from an affordability perspective because you can, hedge on fuel costs. Also, that clean energy and battery storage can be cited in ways that might reduce the amount of transmission and distribution costs that the system needs to build to incorporate it as well. So it's another way to kind of avoid additional costs on people's power bills. So if you want to go to the next slide, I think this will kind of lead into some other sections about why does New Jersey need to take this step. Frankly, we just need leadership from the states. The Trump administration has really put an all-out attack on clean energy and is doing everything in its power to continue our reliance and actually expand our reliance on fossil fuels. We have seen a bunch of orders from the Trump administration under a false emergency pretenses to keep uneconomic fossil fuel plants that were supposed to retire, including one right outside of Philly, the Eddystone plant. There's an additional coal plant in Michigan that has been on a series of 90-day emergency run orders. And this is costing customers hundreds of millions of dollars in order to pay for those costs. And so there's no emergency right now. So those costs are getting forced on the customers totally unnecessarily. And it's also worth noting that these plants, and we're likely to see more of these emergency orders, are some of the most expensive power plants on the system, which is why they were signed up to retire. They tend to be old, really inefficient, and actually not very reliable. Like one of the problems with the Eddystone plant in Pennsylvania is that it didn't actually turn on when it was called and supposedly needed at some point during the summer. So they're not even able to serve the threat under which they were falsely extended beyond their retirement date. So in addition to, just like pro keep fossil fuel plants online, the Department of Energy is, proposing a series of policies to incentivize fossil fuel plants and fossil fuel expansions. The Department of Energy just issued a $1.4 billion loan to a series of utilities in West Virginia, for example, to extend the life of a bunch of coal plants and actually build additional new fossil gas plants in West Virginia, which is part of the PJM service territory. So those costs do not cover the full costs of what it takes to run those plants. So any additional costs around running them are going to be subsidized across the system. And then, as it notes, there's just been a whole bunch of attacks on clean energy as well, rolling back, some of the most beneficial components of the Inflation Reduction Act and things that were really designed to help drive down customer costs. And so we're already seeing the impacts of some of the Trump administration's policies on people's electricity bills that they're getting every month. So we got a bunch of challenges. We think we have ways to solve them. So I'll turn it over to Ed, who's going to move on to the next section.
Ed, you're on mute.
That was helpful. Thank you. So why clean energy? And I'll give you the short answer. Clean energy is the cheapest energy. So go ahead to the next slide. And the energy burden is being put on all of the ratepayers. All of us are paying the price for this increased demand, as Dave points out, from the AI data centers and beneficial electrification, from us switching over to more efficient technologies that are electric and don't have the pollution that is being produced, let's say, from other heating sources for our homes, but it's putting more demand on the electric grid. It's cheaper to operate, it uses less electricity, but it's putting more demand on the grid. And to produce that electricity, it's actually cheaper to use clean energy. And we have to make sure that the energy that we're adding, the electricity that we're producing, this new demand to meet the demand is being produced to save us money. That's ultimately what we're here to say. So if you go to the next slide. So clean energy is an affordable solution. It is the most affordable solution. Our electricity bills are rising. That started on June 1st for New Jersey ratepayers. And that's due to, as Dave explained, a lack of power capacity across the PJM grid. Some people ask, what does PJM stand for? It doesn't really make as much sense these days. So I'll just cut off the sort of question queue. It stands for Pennsylvania, Jersey, and Maryland. That's how the 3 states got started. And we definitely need more generation to meet the rising demand. And some folks will tell you any generation is fine, but if you generate more electricity that's more expensive, it's going to cost you more. And so the slide before says that we're paying the price. That makes a difference. And so that solution to drive down costs and save money needs to be clean, because clean energy is the cheapest. And the longer that we wait to put clean energy projects on the ground and get them built and get them connected, and the longer that it's going to take us then to alleviate the energy rates and the demands, and the higher our rates are going to be. So if you go to the next slide. So what is the Energy Leadership Act? Ultimately, this is a codification of Governor Murphy's goal in Executive Order 315 that commits New Jersey to 100% clean energy by 2035. It builds on the 2018 Clean and Renewable Energy Act, which requires the state of New Jersey to get 50% of its electricity from Class 1 renewables, that's solar, wind, et cetera, by 2030. And if you add that to the nuclear energy, which is clean, doesn't produce pollution, that gets us to around 88% by 2030. So in the next 5 years, New Jersey is roughly on target to get about 88% of its electricity from clean sources. It also provides a definition that has been negotiated and vetted by the environmental justice community groups that is the strongest in the nation for what would be considered clean energy. And that is something the Sierra Club and New Jersey LCV are committed to. The environmental justice groups are leading on this definition. It has been referred to as a squeaky clean definition. It is non-negotiable, and we are standing arm in arm with our environmental justice partners in their leadership, and with them in the lead to ensure that that stays in there. And the goal of 100% clean electricity by 2035 is one of the most ambitious in the United States of America. And we couldn't need or use or have a more refreshing goal to be passed in the United States after what we've seen at the federal level with the clean energy ban coming out of the Trump administration, the rollbacks of the Inflation Reduction Act, the fact that ratepayers are paying $220 more a year because of moves by the Trump administration, which are jacking up costs for hardworking families by the disastrous policies that are lining the pockets of the oil, gas, and coal industry. We can change that direction and turn that ship around in New Jersey, and the legislature is poised to do just that. So if we go to the next slide, we can talk about the benefits. If you walk away from this webinar with one thing, that is, I want you to remember that clean energy is the cheapest source of electricity. But you know two things. I want you to know that clean energy is also the fastest to get online. If you want to build, which I don't know why you would want to choke your neighbors or pollute the air, water, and land that we need for our food and our families and our communities. But if you wanted to build a natural gas facility, you're looking at 5 to 6 years to get it constructed and turned on and producing electricity. A clean energy project like solar, which is in fact the cheapest, takes 1 to 2 years from initial design to construction to turning it on. We know it's cleaner. In addition, it's healthier for our air, and the jobs that are created are local and predominantly union. Those are great benefits. So if you go to the next slide, if I mention it again, clean energy is the cheapest form of energy. And the 100% clean electricity bill would help ensure that New Jersey customers are buying energy from the cheapest sources like solar, battery storage, which is a way for us to store the electricity that's being generated from these clean sources and saving that for when they're not being able to produce. So like at night when they say, oh, you can't have solar at night, you can with battery because the batteries then discharge at night and throughout there, and wind as well. And they're not subject to these ongoing fuel costs, the volatility of the fossil fuel market, or disruptions from climate fueled weather events, which disrupt the shipping of these oil and gas shipments that also change the markets and raise prices. And there's actually a large backlog of these cost-saving clean energy projects that are waiting to be connected to the local grid, which is known as the PJM. And so if there was a study done by NRDC that if 30% of the projects that were waiting in the queue, which are clean energy projects, were connected at the last auction, the prices you're paying today for electricity would be 63% cheaper. Projects that are waiting in the queue that are clean energy projects are waiting 5 years to turn on, and they are ready to go. But the PJM utility operator is saying no to them and instead connecting these more expensive, dirty projects, because the people who vote on them are also making money from their dirty, expensive projects, and they're picking their friends, quite frankly. And there's been reforms. One of them is a piece of legislation that requires the votes to be public. But there's been a lot of pressure by Governor Murphy and the legislature and other states. The CEO resigned to go back to his family in Texas. People that are on the board serving on PJM, this independent nonprofit really run by the oil and gas industry, have been replaced. There's trouble in the operations of this, and with pressure and oversight and transparency, it's starting to come apart a little bit. But there's a lot more that needs to be done there, because they're not hooking up these clean electricity projects, wind, solar, and that's causing our rates to be higher. And many families across New Jersey are paying 20% more because of it. So I'll just repeat this again. If 30% of the projects that are clean were connected, just 30%, less than a third, your prices today would be 63% cheaper. That's a big deal. So next slide. This is the levelized cost of electricity over time. So I'm going to show you which line is which, and it's like super tiny on my screen. So if I get it wrong, please excuse me. I'm going to go from the highest, as Dave mentioned this one, and that is the peaker plants. Peaker plants are paid to do nothing except for when we really need the supply. So they're super expensive. They're supposed to turn on when they're requested to turn on to meet the demand. It's unfortunate to hear that they're being paid to turn on, and in the case that was cited, they weren't. And they're really expensive. That's the red line on top. The next most expensive source of electricity is nuclear. That's the purple line. So right there, those are your top two most expensive sources of electricity. You go down to the gray line, that's coal. Then you go down to the yellow line, that's combined cycle, that's gas. Everyone says we need more gas plants. We need more frack gas, methane, natural gas. Yellow is your gas. And then all the way at the bottom, you'll see blue, solar, and I think that's right. And then green, onshore wind. I think I got the colors right. It's actually hard to read colors when they're minuscule to see the difference. And those are the cheapest. And that's the levelized cost. And that's looking over time at the cost of fuel and the fluctuations. I want to point out one more thing on this chart. And I love this chart because it helps to show why this is so important for the state of New Jersey and for our families. If you look at the blue line, which is solar, and you look back just 15 years ago, look how expensive solar was. In just a decade and a half, how much it's dropped as scales of economy, as businesses got started, as manufacturing, much of it happening now in the US. Of course, we want to see more of that, got started, the price dropped. And even with subsidies and expanding out, it became so competitive. It's so competitive that the Trump administration is trying to kill it. It's so competitive that some states are trying to do things to ban it. And that's because the oil and gas industry wants to continue to profit in the business as usual, which is make our air, water, and land toxic. And places like Newark, New Jersey, where 1 in 4 children have asthma, which is way higher than the national average, where just 9% or 1 in 10 children have asthma because of the concentration of polluting generating facilities. And we can do better in our state, and we must. And we're here to ask for your help in doing that. So I think that's my last slide, but go to the next one just to see. So I have a couple more. Sorry, I was going to turn it over. I was getting you all excited about what the next up. So getting these clean energy projects connected. This is a research that just came out recently, could save New Jersey families $393 per household by 2030. That's money. Next slide. And we talked a little bit about the fact that these are the fastest ways to lower our energy. 1 to 2 years to get solar online, 5 to 6 years to get a fossil fuel combined cycle natural gas facility. That is even if you can get a turbine, they're so back ordered and they're having trouble manufacturing, et cetera. So next slide. I talked about dirty air. I talked about asthma and cancer. This really makes a difference. We call ourselves an environmental group, but I really think of myself as someone who's working on public health. It matters what we do to the environment, but how it relates to us and our families and our children and their health and future generations. And the 100% clean energy legislation, the energy leadership have, is it enable us to move beyond these dirty fossil fuels and ensure that our communities are healthier and that our most vulnerable residents of our state can breathe clean air, free from asthma, cancer, and heart disease causing pollutants. Next slide. It creates good local jobs. It's estimated that the legislation would create over 20,000 in-state good local jobs, predominantly in these large-scale installations, union jobs, and to make sure that the energy and electricity we're buying, because we're an importer, is made right here, more of that electricity. And it's also going to make sure that we're doubling down on the fastest growing sector of the New Jersey economy, which is the clean energy sector. So next slide. So all in all, I think this bill sort of sells itself. It is a win-win-win. The only losers, and I hate to say it, is going to be the current folks that are winning, and those are the shareholders of the oil, gas, and coal companies that are making the profits today. And that's why they're spending millions of dollars on campaigns of misinformation and disinformation to try to keep on the business as usual model that pollutes our air, water, and land. To save money, to save our communities, the best path forward for us is the Energy Leadership Act. So now we can understand a little bit more about what you can do to help. And I'm going to pass it over to Angeli Ramos, who's going to outline some of those next steps and why it's so important for your help today.
Thank you, Ed. And thank you, everybody. This is really exciting. So I'm going to go over the timeline, the urgency, and just by looking at the timeline, you will understand that it is an urgency. It's quite urgent. So Megan, please, next slide. So we basically have about 2 months before Governor Murphy leaves, right? This is his second term. He's being termed off, and Governor-elect Mikey Sherrill will be inaugurated about January the 20th or, around that week. So pretty much we are currently in a session of our legislative session that lasts 2 years, but we're at the very tail end of it. And as Ed was mentioning before, is between the elections and the new administration getting started. So pretty much it's like this moment in time where a lot of bills are flying in and out, right? Some good that we really have to push, like this one, to move it forward, to get it passed, And unfortunately, and oftentimes what happens is that the bad bills also show up. So really crazy time in the legislature, but we are here to take advantage of it to successfully push forward the New Jersey Energy Leadership Act. Um, Next slide. So to give you a sense of timeline, right? As many of you know, originally 100% clean energy by 2035 was these provisions were included in a past bill S237, Senate version S237. But there were significant issues with that bill by the labor community, by just even the legislators themselves. So a huge stakeholdering process got started that really took feedback from all of these constituencies, including ourselves. And this process has continue probably until yesterday. So right now we need, right, we're going through this stakeholder engagement. We need the new bill that will reflect, right, all of these agreements from all of these constituencies to be introduced by the prime sponsors, both from the Senate side and the Assembly side. Then the bill will be assigned to committees. Usually will go to the Senate Energy and Environment Committee, as we're very used to. And then the Assembly side, that could be a little bit tricky sometimes, but we'll see what happens. And then through, we're pretty much done with November. Right, next week it's Thanksgiving, but through the month of December, you can see all the committee votes, right? And then this bill hopefully and successfully moving forward into a full Senate and Assembly floor vote, which essentially means that the legislature has passed this bill entirely. And then it goes to Governor Murphy's desk, and he has to sign it. And all of this needs to happen before January 20th, because if that doesn't happen before the end of the session, we basically have to start all over again, right? It's a new legislative session of 2 years. It's a new administration, and there's even new electeds on the assembly side, right? Because we just also had an election for our assembly representatives. So this slide is for me to tell you that there's a lot that needs to happen in these couple of weeks before January the 20th, and we need all the help we can get from all of you to ensure that our representatives are hearing the need and that New Jerseyans truly want this to move as quickly as possible and to be passed. Next slide. So status of the bill. Next slide. Thank you, Megan. So I was sort of touching a little bit on the previous bill, which is S237. If you Google, right, if you go to the legislative website and you search for S237 or Assembly version 1480, you can find the previous language of this bill. But like I said, a really robust stakeholder process has been conducted involving the Assembly, the Senate, the governor's office, labor partners, environmental justice partners, really contributing to making the language as best and protective as possible for all constituencies. So currently, like I said, we're going to be introducing this bill, and it will hopefully be heard on a Senate Energy and Environment Committee this December 1st, right? So that is Monday, exactly after Thanksgiving. So this is a really flag for all of you guys that this will be heard in the legislature. It'll be the first committee. We're very excited for that. And as I go through my slides, I'm going to tell you ways that you can engage with this very exciting hearing. Next slide. So what can you do? And that's what I'm really going to be focusing on this part of the presentation. You've heard from Dave, right? All of the issues that we have with PJM, all of the issues that we have with load increasing, not just in, the rest of the states of PJM, but here in New Jersey, the issues with the Trump administration rolling back all of these incentives on clean energy, really having a massive impact on our utility bills in addition to PJM. I mean, we're just being hit left and right by all of this awful policies and aggressive behavior by the federal administration. And so New Jersey, as Dave pointed out, the states have to lead. This is our moment to lead. And the Energy Leadership Act, in its name, is a way for New Jersey to lead and to go in the direction that New Jerseyans have always wanted to go, which is clean energy, less pollution, better public health, because we need it. So we have organized various ways of taking action that you can engage. And here we've organized them on the with increasing level of flexibility. So what does that mean? Number one is you send a message to your legislator's inbox, right? It's an email, which is a simple action form. And I'm going to show a QR code that you can scan really easily. And Jackie is going to put the link in the chat for those of you that cannot scan a QR code. And that's just, filling out your information, and it will send an email to the legislative leadership in New Jersey. That's very simple. It can take you a minute, tops two. Or you can call your legislator. Calls to legislative offices are incredibly impactful. They pay attention to it. They record the messages. Legislators know about it, right? So that might take you maybe 5 minutes, maybe a little bit more than that. So a little bit more time. Number three, phone banking constituents in key legislative districts. As you can imagine, right, the passage of bills really depend on legislative leadership. That's the Senate president, that's the Speaker of the Assembly, right? Majority whip, etc. So we need to target particular districts that we know will really get us to move this bill. So we have created a phone banking program that you can get involved, that is just basically calling, you would be calling constituents for those from those districts for them to patch through to their legislator. So that, for example, Senate President Scutari would hear directly from a person that lives in his district, a person that directly votes for him. That is incredibly valuable. So number three will definitely take more time, but it's really up to you how much time you want to commit to this phone banking. You can do it for 30 minutes, you can do it for an hour, you can do it for an entire day, and that would make me really happy. But of course, no, you don't have to do that. There's also, if you feel like putting something out there in the public, we have created an LTE, which is a letter to the editor toolkit, that is designed to help you put in your words why 100% or the New Jersey Energy Leadership Act is so important, and why should legislators be moving towards passing this, right? And so we can help you place this in your local patch, or just like your local media outlets. But that is a great way to voice your perspective and your opinion on clean energy to your neighbors and your community. And then number five, well, there's a six, but number five, engage at the State House. So remember when I said that there's going to be a Senate Energy and Environment hearing on December 1st? Well, of course, we're going to have a rally on December 1st. LCV, New Jersey Sierra Club, amongst other organizations, we will be having a rally at 9 a.m. And in the next slide, I will give you the QR code for that so that you can RSVP as well. And on December 18th, this is a save the date. We're just letting you know we're going to be having a fully blown lobby day that is designed for everybody to really just talk to every single legislator that we can. We put together meetings ahead of time. And so you ideally would go and talk to your own legislator, the person that you vote for, and really express your opinion about clean energy and why you think it's necessary to pass it as soon as possible. And then lastly, this, of course, would require the most flexibility from your part, and we recognize that not everybody can do this, but these are all the options, right? So last one, depending on urgent last minute hearings. So in lame duck, as you can imagine, everything gets squeezed in, and the bill can be heard in a second committee, right? The budget committee on the Senate side, or the budget committee on the Assembly side. And we find out 3 or 4 days before the hearing. That's very little time to organize a lot of people. through email and things like that. But if we have a solid team of folks that have the flexibility to say, yeah, sure, I will be there in 3 days, no problem. I will go, I will testify, I will go, I will lobby. That is monumental, so helpful, because we can count on people that can help us really carry the message at the State House. So next slide. So this is a QR code, as I was mentioning, for that action page. You just fill in your information and it will immediately send an email to our legislative leadership so that they know that people in New Jersey really want 100% clean energy by 2035. And Jackie, you've been putting the links in the chat, so thank you for that. I'm gonna give it just 30 seconds so everybody can scan this if they can. Okay, next slide. Yes, the rally. That's Ed and me at the center, everybody. Because we've done this before. Exactly. So like I said, rally December 1st, 9 a.m. in front of the annex building at the State House. There are some steps there. It's usually where we host rallies. Is actually where we had this rally right here that you see. So that is the QR code on the bottom left. If you scan that, you can RSVP or register for the rally, and you'll get all the details and all the information. It's really exciting to be in that energy and in community of people that really want to see the same things as you do for New Jersey. And then with that energy, you go inside and then you talk to legislators. It's really exciting. And also, we usually always hear from our legislative champions like Senator Smith, who's been sponsoring 100% for a long time now. And that is also really inspiring to see and hear. Next slide. And then the lobby day, this is a save the date. This is an example. Megan is actually in these pictures. Allison from New Jersey LCV as well. We had a very successful lobby day for 100% back in June. We had about like 60 people, right? Like, yeah, Jackie's giving me the nod. So it was an incredible lobby day, so many people, and it was a really busy day at the State House. So we were grabbing legislators left and right. We were jumping from one committee to another. We were talking to legislators, but also learning about even other issues. It was quite a day. We were there the entire day. So expect something very similar to this on December 18th. And we will follow up with everybody with more details. Next slide. So I've gave you the save the date. I gave you the way of registering for the rally, but here is a QR code. And Jackie, if you can put the link also for this in the chat, thank you. If you feel like you have the time and flexibility to do the phone banking, to write an LTE, to be flexible enough to jump at the State House and help us at a committee hearing or grabbing legislators, or if it could be as simple as, hey, Angeli, can you show me how to call my legislator? I haven't done it before. How do I do it? Scan this QR code, answer this Google form, and tell us what you're interested in. It could be all of it, it could be just one, and we will get back to you with how to do all of this, how to sign up for the phone banking, how to call your legislator, and if hopefully we get to create a team of flexible advocates that can help us at the State House. So I'm gonna just give it a few more seconds because I want to make sure that if you can do this, you have the ability to do this Google form. And if you don't have a smartphone to scan this QR code, go to the chat because Jackie just put the link to it. So you have two ways of accessing this. All right. And next slide. Oh, next slide is questions. There's no more slides, right, Megan? All right, how about we go back to the previous slide in case people haven't had the chance. Yeah, and we'll leave it here and then we'll take questions. So thank you everybody for putting your questions on the Q&A. I'm gonna turn it over to Jackie so that she can ask us the questions that have not been answered. And thank you, Ed and Dave, for you guys. You've been answering lots of questions. That's great. So Jackie, over to you.
Thanks, Angeli. We were able to respond to a lot of questions in the chat already, but we have one from Sue, wondering any idea of the time frame for the lobby day on the 18th.
Sue, we usually start in the morning because typically the majority of the hearings are scheduled at 10 a.m. So we would most likely arrive at around 9 to get set up. We always get a committee room. We have coffee. We have some morning snacks. We will give you the materials, the talking points, who you're meeting with, who's in your team. It's a very organized event. Ed will be there. I will be there. We'll help you. And then, the talking points and also an explanation of the bill and its current status. So probably starting at 9 and then going through the day until you can stay, right? Some people stay the entire day and some folks only have an hour or 2 hours. And so you make the best of the day.
Awesome, thank you. At this point, there are no other open questions, so we can give it a few minutes, but otherwise, I think all of them have been responded to.
What was one question that was sort of answered, sort of like, the question about urgency and why now? Every day that passes that this bill does not get passed through the legislature, signed into law by the governor, is another day that your electricity bills are going to go up, because it's going to mean more expensive, dirty electricity is going to be flooding or not flooding your supply, and you're going to pay the price. And ultimately, we can break free from this cycle in the state of New Jersey, take control of our energy, and create good local jobs that clean up our air and lower our costs. And inaction would be malfeasance coming off of an election that showed that affordability, particularly utility affordability, was one of the top issues that were on people's minds. And so, we need your help to make sure to connect the dots with the elected officials, that we're still paying attention, and that their opportunity to deliver on their commitments on the campaign trail is in this lame duck session of the legislature. But we can't continue at this pace with 20% electricity rate increases from the oil, gas, and coal electricity that we're currently using. Something has to change, and the Energy Leadership Act is exactly the solution to bring our costs down and bring prices under control and the jobs back to New Jersey.
Yeah, thank you, Ed. One more question from Allison for Angeli, Dave, and Ed. Is there any way to preclude nuclear from contributing to the 100% goal?
I can start. So the clean energy definition is really based on carbon emissions and emissions of co-pollutants, right? And so that essentially includes any type of burning of fuel made out of carbon that can generate CO2, that can generate, well, it wouldn't generate methane, but that can generate CO2 and other forms of carbon like benzene, formaldehyde, and all of these very toxic pollutants. That is really what clean energy is. Nuclear doesn't burn any fuel made out of carbon, therefore, it does qualify under that definition. We see nuclear, as presented in the levelized costs of energy that Ed showed us, as a very expensive form of energy generation. But we do recognize that lots of states, lots of elected officials do see nuclear as a solution for large load power generation. So, yeah, I have to say that because of the focus has been on emissions and co-pollutants, there's really no way to exclude nuclear. Plus, yeah, I don't know. Before I keep going on the rabbit hole, I'm gonna ask you, Dave and Ed, if you have anything else. to contribute to the difficult conversation of nuclear.
I mean, I'll turn it over to Ed. Like, I will acknowledge I don't live in New Jersey, so I encourage New Jerseyans to come up with a plan that makes sense for the communities it serves. And I noted this in the chatter on this question around, like, I think new nuclear is unlikely to play a significant role. It just takes too long to develop. The Vogtle plant, which is the last new nuclear plant built in the United States, down in Georgia, took about 15 plus years. So if you're talking about a 2035 goal, um, there's things they could do to existing nuclear units to make them more efficient and get more power out of those. But like building a entirely new power plant from scratch, a nuclear power plant from scratch, is unlikely to play a contributing role, at least in the um, time frame of which the bill is setting to achieve. You know, back to Ed's kind of point of like, one of the biggest advantages of clean energy is that it can get put online very, very quickly. And we've got urgent needs now, right? We've got to meet needs in the next 2 year, 3, 4 years, not 20 years from now. So I think for people who have a concern about nuclear or supportive of nuclear, either way, you kind of choose that side, either side that you kind of take on that of like, in the next 10 years, there's probably not going to be a significant increase in reliance on nuclear just because of how long it takes to build it.
I want to add also that we also have to keep in mind that our current energy generation in the state, 40% is existing nuclear. So nuclear for all of our elected officials, it sort of plays a significant role just because we get so much electricity from it. But thank you, Dave, for that perspective and that so much information about new nuclear, right? And the potential of that in New Jersey and other states. Any other questions, Jackie?
One more interesting one from Philip. And I know we're at time, so this will be our last question for the evening. Can car makers be encouraged to make EVs a home battery resource?
I don't think it's the car makers. The vehicle to grid technology is, yes, the car maker needs to be able to get the energy, the electricity that's stored in the battery to the car, from the car onto the grid, but the grid also needs to be able to handle the electricity going back out with net metering solutions and the charger itself. There's a lot of different steps across there. So I don't mean it's not just the car manufacturer. And the biggest gift that we have, and all of us should be talking about this more, is electrification of school buses. Because as a former teacher, they're only used 180 days a year. That's less than half. And in the summer, which is generally our peak season for electric demand, they're not used. And so that means they're just sitting there and can really be a major part of our energy storage solution. And help us to levelize and become like what they call virtual power plants, and reduce peak load demand. Instead of needing a peaker plant, you've got these electric school buses just sitting there waiting to meet your demand, and they can make money from that and help reduce costs for our school taxes. And so there's just a lot that we can be doing to be forward thinking on that. So the short answer, I guess, is we could be doing a lot more in this space, but it's not just the manufacturers of the vehicles. It's the different components too, around the utilities, the bidirectional power, the power meters, and just comprehensive approach across all the electric vehicles and the beneficial electrification. And I would just emphasize large vehicles, particularly school buses, because of the 180 days, and other large vehicles like dump trucks or city vehicles like um, garbage trucks or buses and bus fleets and things like that can really play a big piece of that solution. So it's very innovative, and there's no doubt that that should be a big piece of the solution for us. And we always say clean energy coupled with batteries. And we didn't emphasize a lot of the battery pieces in this because we're really talking about electric production, the power coming out of your plug, and batteries will play a major component in the cost reductions and savings.
All right. So with that, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you for your time. Hopefully you can help us move this forward and engage with us. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Ed, so much. This was a great presentation. Thank you, Jackie and Megan, for your help.
Thank you.
And we'll see you soon. We'll be in touch. Take care, everybody.
Great work. Thank you, everyone.